The auction hall was a spectacle of wealth and power, a grand coliseum where only the richest and most influential beings in the galaxy gathered to fight over relics of war, artifacts of conquest, and ships that once ruled the void. Every seat was taken, every eye gleaming with the hunger of acquisition. The air vibrated with tension, and in the center of it all, standing among creatures twice, 3 times her size, was a 13-year-old human girl. Clara stood silently, her expression unreadable as the bidding war raged around her. The ship on display was unlike anything the galaxy had seen in centuries, a colossal, obsidian war vessel, once thought lost in the aftermath of the Celestial Wars. It was a thing of nightmares and legend, whispered about in hushed tones, feared for the destruction it had once wrought. And now it was up for auction, a prize only the most powerful could afford. The auctioneer, a slick, many-limbed creature draped in the finest silks of a dozen worlds, called out the latest bid. The numbers climbed at an exponential rate, each new offer a staggering testament to the desperation in the room. Representatives of warlords, syndicate heads, high-ranking officials, and private collectors vied for the warship. Their voices cold, their expressions greedy. They saw only power. They saw only what they could do with a weapon like this in their hands. No one noticed Clara at first. No one paid attention to the girl who had quietly taken a seat in the back, observing the spectacle with the calmness of someone who had already won. The numbers soared higher, and then, with a small flick of her wrist, she raised her hand. Silence followed. It was so absurd, so out of place that the entire room froze for a moment before erupting in laughter. A human child stepping into a bidding war worth more than entire star systems? The auctioneer hesitated for only a second before recovering, his voice tinged with amusement as he acknowledged her bid. One of the bidders, a towering reptilian general, turned toward her with an amused sneer. "Run along, child. This is not a place for playthings." Clara didn't flinch. She merely tilted her head slightly. "I just outbid you." That wiped the smirk from his face. The laughter in the room faded into murmurs, calculations being made, suspicions forming. Who was she? How did she get the credits? Who was backing her? The auctioneer, sensing the growing tension, cleared his throat and called for another bid. Someone else raised the stakes. Clara matched it instantly. Again, another counter. Again, she raised. With every new number, the room shifted from amusement to disbelief to something sharper, something uncomfortable. It wasn't just the credits. Anyone could gather wealth. But the way she bid, without hesitation, without concern, as if she had already decided the outcome, made the others uneasy. The bidding war narrowed. One by one, the other competitors dropped out, unwilling or unable to match the numbers. The last challenger, a high-ranking member of the Galactic Syndicate, sat back with a scowl. "This is ridiculous. She's just a child." The auctioneer turned to Clara. "Final bid. Do you wish to raise?" She met his gaze, and for the first time that night she smiled. "No need." The gavel struck. A ripple of whispers spread through the hall as the realization settled in. The girl had won. She had just purchased the most powerful warship in the galaxy. And that was when everything changed. The auctioneer's practiced grin faltered for the briefest moment, but he recovered quickly, gesturing toward the towering vessel behind him. "Congratulations to our honored buyer. May you wield your new acquisition with wisdom and—" He stopped. The lights flickered. A low hum resonated through the hall, deep and unnatural, vibrating through the floor beneath them. The ship, which had been dormant, dead, suddenly came to life. A voice, ancient and cold, rumbled through the chamber. Identity confirmed. The moment the warship fully activated, the auction hall descended into chaos. The once arrogant elites of the galaxy, beings who had ruled through fear, wealth, and manipulation, now sat frozen, their calculations failing them. The pulsing energy from the ancient vessel bathed the hall in an eerie glow, its hue vibrating through every surface. The realization had set in. This was no ordinary auction. This was no ordinary ship, and the child who had just claimed ownership of it was no ordinary bidder. Clara stood at the center of it all, completely at ease, her small figure dwarfed by the towering warlords and corporate magnates who had moments ago laughed at her presence. Now they were silent. Now they were afraid, not of her, but of the thing she had awakened, the thing none of them truly understood. The first to break the silence was the syndicate enforcer, a hardened veteran with cybernetic arms and a reputation for ending negotiations with a bullet. He took a slow step forward, voice carefully measured. "Listen, kid, maybe we got off on the wrong foot. We can make a deal. You clearly have resources, but you don't want to make enemies here." Clara tilted her head slightly. "You still think you're in control, don't you?" Before he could respond, the warship's external panels shifted, revealing concealed turrets that turned with unnerving precision toward the gathered audience. A dozen targeting systems locked on to the most dangerous individuals in the room, their crimson laser sights painting lethal dots on scales, fur, and polished exoskeletons. Every exit sealed shut with a resounding clang, the heavy blast doors slamming into place with the finality of a guillotine. The auctioneer, who had prided himself on his ability to maintain order even among the most ruthless beings in the galaxy, took an uneasy step back. "Miss Clara, perhaps we should discuss—" She raised a single finger, and his voice died in his throat. The display screens lining the hall flickered to life, revealing the full extent of the trap. Outside the auction station, an entire fleet had materialized from the shadows of space. Warships of unknown design, sleek and angular, moved with eerie coordination, their black hulls absorbing the light around them. They had been there the entire time, waiting, cloaked in silence. The realization hit the crowd like a physical blow. They had walked willingly into a stronghold. Their personal guards, their escorts, their escape routes, none of it mattered now. Every ship in orbit was already surrounded. Every communications line was compromised. The power they had wielded so effortlessly in the past was suddenly meaningless. Clara took a step forward, her boots echoing against the pristine floor. "For years the galaxy has been ruled by people like you, warlords, crime bosses, corrupt officials. You built your empires on the suffering of others, believing yourselves untouchable. But power isn't about what you take. It's about what you can hold on to when the tides turn." The reptilian general, whose forces had conquered entire worlds, bared his fangs in an attempt to mask his unease. "You have no right to—" A sudden pulse of energy from the warship cut him off. The very air in the room vibrated, and something deep within the vessel rumbled to life, something ancient and sentient. A distorted voice, neither entirely mechanical nor organic, filled the hall. Command recognized, authority transferred. It was an acknowledgement, a declaration. The ship was no longer a relic to be fought over. It had chosen its master, and the galaxy's most powerful individuals were now at her mercy. The panic set in quickly. Some clutched at their personal comms, hoping in vain to call for help. Others reached for weapons, only to find themselves immediately targeted by the ship's automated defenses. The syndicate enforcer, ever the pragmatist, held up his hands and slowly took a step back, calculating his odds. Clara remained unfazed. There are two kinds of people in this room, those who will adapt and those who will be remembered as part of a failed era. She gestured to the warships outside. You built your power through force. You expanded your reach through war. But you never planned for a moment like this. You never imagined the day would come when someone else would hold the reins. And now, you have a choice to make. The tension was suffocating. Every being in the room was now hyper-aware of their own fragility. They had spent their lives believing they were the ones who decided the fate of others, that their influence was absolute. But at this moment, as the ship's weapons adjusted their targeting parameters with cold efficiency, they understood the brutal truth. They were no longer in control. A nervous chuckle broke the silence. A merchant prince, whose wealth had bought and sold entire moons, shook his head. What? What do you want? Credits? Resources? No one does something like this without wanting something in return.